Why did the Big 12 actually reject Memphis? Well, because the ACC is going to fall apart in 5 years, and we're just going to take what we want. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. The ACC is falling apart before 2031, and the Big 12 and Memphis are giving us signals as to how and why, and I'll explain more with TJ Pittenger of College Football Addiction. Then the SEC and the Big 10 are in a fight over scheduling. I think Kalani Sitake is wrong, and I do think Kurt Cignetti is right. Let's talk about how the Big 12 can get more teams in the college football playoff by adopting that SEC scheduling model. Then, is BYU paying way too much for a five-star? Quarterback? Ryder Lyons coming to school for a wild, massive number. And is that against the values and ideals of the school? I don't think so. I'll explain more. If you hit subscribe, I get to keep my job. TJ, the ACC is going away, right?
What are your thoughts on just where the ACC is in general? And then we'll go back and forth here.
If we start the conversation on where the ACC is in general, I think we started with Memphis, oddly enough. Reason being, I think the Big 12 is giving you something, in the airport, they have the guy. You've been in airports here recently. They got the guys who bring the planes on in, and they're the ones that you watch for the signal. I think the Big 12 is sending a signal right now by not adding Memphis, despite the girth of that offer. $200+ million. You can exit in 2030 without any questions asked, and the Big 12 makes $200 big bucks, and Memphis goes away. The reason the Big 12 said no, in my opinion, is because the ACC is increasingly weakening. And the reason that we know that is because year in, year out, now as we track to 2030, 2031, Florida State and Clemson can exit for less and less money. We know that's exactly what they want. And this Band-Aid the ACC has put over those two schools is a positive one for the conference. But it's still a Band-Aid. And I still do believe, and I think you would agree, Clemson and Florida State are looking for avenues out in the next 5 to 6 years as TV contracts are reworked. And the Big 12, if Brett Yormark, this is why I think the ACC is on not its last leg, but getting close. If the Big 12 did not believe the Louisvilles of the world or NC State or Miami as a pipe dream or North Carolina, Virginia, Duke, school, if they didn't believe that they would be available here in 5-6 years when Clemson and Florida State try to exit, I think the Big 12 would bite at Memphis. But instead, what Yormark wants to do is not overload the league, dilute the league. We're already trying to make UCF and Houston, Cincinnati feel comfortable in football. Why do that with Memphis when hopefully here in a few years, you have the ability to go get bigger brands out of the ACC? I believe, one, the Big 12 is looking directly at the ACC to poach here in a few seasons. I think, two, Memphis put the stipulation in there for the no risk clause where they could exit in 2030. That year is very important. Memphis knows the Big 12 will be on the prowl in 2030, the same way the Big 12 was on the prowl in 2022 and 23 with the Pac-12. That's why I think the ACC's death date could come as early as 2030, 2031. But I know you disagree. You see a little more life in the Jim Phillips era of this conference.
I like you a lot, and I don't like the ACC.
Yeah.
So it actually pains me to do this, but I am just being honest, right? This is just the way I see it. It pains me to have to say that the ACC may have done something, I don't know if by accident, I don't know if, what, but it pains me to give them any credit at all. But I'm going to do it. And so maybe people will realize that I'm at least being sincere with this and not just, I'm the last guy that wants to defend the ACC. I promise you that. Yes, I agree. I think Florida, maybe UNC, maybe Miami out in 2030. Although with this, I do have an interesting thought on Miami. And what I'm going to say for the other teams maybe applies to the Canes as well. I think that if Florida State and Clemson leave in 2030, I think they get a full share to whichever conference they go to, right? I think UNC is probably in that same category. Miami, probably, but I'm less certain there. Anybody else who would leave, try to go to the Power 2, right? The Big 10 or the SEC. I don't think they get a full share, right? Mm-hmm. Could a Louisville, in theory, go? Yes, but they're probably coming in at like a half share, a quarter share for some number of years. So I don't worry about many other teams going to the SEC or the Big 10. And then you look at, okay, well, who's left in the ACC? What are the biggest brands left in the ACC past Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and North Carolina? Miami, again, maybe you could even leave in this conversation. Well, you're looking at the Louisvilles, you're looking at the Georgia Techs, the NC States, Pittsburgh, maybe, SMU, if they can sustain success. And what I think about that 2030 timeline is, one, it would cost those programs, $75 million to leave at that moment. I don't know, outside of maybe SMU, who could pony up that kind of money when it comes to Louisville and Georgia Tech and other programs. You're also looking at what the revenue is in 2030 if you're SMU, if you're Louisville, and you can be at the top of the league when it comes to TV ratings. Georgia Tech was number one in the ACC last year in TV ratings. Now, did that have to do with them playing Georgia and Florida State in standalone games? Absolutely. However, if you're Georgia Tech and you're making an additional $15 to $20 million in the ACC compared to what you would make in the Big 12, does it become harder for the Big 12 to poach you? Would Georgia Tech say, you know what, we're going to pay $75 million to leave, and then we're going to make less in the Big 12 because of this unequal revenue sharing that Florida State and Clemson fought for over these next 5 or 6 years, and we're going to go and be a middle of the pack team, whereas Georgia Tech, Louisville, NC State could all theoretically run the conference. Like, they could be the big dog at that point. You also keep in the other logistical things of travel. You keep in the idea of, the rivalries you've built over the last 20, 30 years. Now, does that mean as much as the money? No, it doesn't. But it means something, right? Like the familiarity with your opponents playing in that North Carolina triangle or just whatever. I do think that means something to your fan base. So when you consider, really long-winded, obviously, but when you consider travel, when you consider the $75 million buyout that I don't know if these schools would have, when you consider the revenue disparity, because that's what it all comes down to, money, right? If you made, even if the Big Ten was able to break you even, right, and say like, oh, we'll bring you in at a bigger share, or we reworked our deal so you actually make the same as you do in the ACC. Well, if you're breaking even at that point, is the $75 million worth it when you could run the conference? Like, theoretically, Louisville would be the best team left in the conference. Would you leave if you were now the big dog making the most money with the most say and also pay money to leave? That's where I think the ACC, it had to be sheer luck, because it certainly wasn't their foresight. That's where the ACC may have protected themselves once these big programs do leave.
Yeah, the only problem I have with that is longevity of the conference, long-term strength of the conference. I don't foresee it being there because the Big 12 survived off of adding brands like Utah, adding brands like Colorado, Arizona State. They made a huge splash to say, rest of the country, we're not just adding 4 mid-majors. We're not doing what the Pac-12 did and getting Boise State. We added big dogs who bring in Olympic sports success, football success, and a brand that you know. For the ACC, there will be nothing sexy when those schools leave. The best thing they could do is backfill with USF or Memphis. And from that point, you're already feeling the instability of, okay, they lost their Texas and Oklahoma, but who else is there? Now, we know that Louisville's still there. We know that maybe the Georgia Techs of the world, like you said, at table. But the rest of the country looks at it, and TV networks look at that, and they go, well, now what? You're far less valuable than we expected you to be. And when that contract is reworked in 2030, 2031, those 2 years are so crucial. I foresee, it has to. When your top 2 schools leave, ESPN or Fox won't look at the ACC and say, yeah, we'll give you the same amount of money, right? It's going to go down. So stability would be the thing that I think Brett Yormark will pick the phone up. He will call Louisville,
That's where I would agree with you. I think what the ACC may have done with this deal is buy them enough time to keep. They may be able to entice Louisville and Georgia Tech and some of these programs that we think the Big 12 would poach. I'm sorry. The ACC may be able to entice them to stay until 2036. Like, to me, that's the gray area. I have no doubts that when ESPN and the ACC have to redo their deal for 2037 and beyond, that is where the ACC is the most vulnerable. I think they've kind of given themselves not a completely fail-safe plan, but somewhat of a safety net from 2030 to 2036. Not saying that people couldn't leave in 2030, not saying that they wouldn't leave. I'm sure Yormark will try. I'm sure he will approach. But I do think there's at least, at one point, I would have told you there's a 5% chance that Louisville and some of these teams stay in the ACC. I think that number is much higher now because of what we've kind of considered. However, in 2036, the dam's breaking open. Like people, there's no way ESPN reworks that deal for the same amount that it was. Right now, ESPN's kind of locked into it. Like they don't have an option to cancel anymore because they extended from 2027.
If North Carolina and Miami exit, then it's over. Because then they haven't backfilled enough to keep the 14.
They would have to backfill.
14.
Yeah, they'll have to. The composition clause means they'd have to add more teams. But I do think that they will. Yeah. Like I think they'll go out and add, which has to piss ESPN off.
Correct.
Because the rule is not, you got to get any views. It's just you got to have this many teams. So switching out an FSU for a USF is the most, bass backwards thing that you could do. Yeah. But it still qualifies. It's like my wife's like, hey, I got to have a car, and I replace her Tesla with a Pinto, right? And well, you got to. Oh, all you said was that you had to have a car. So that's a terrible analogy, but here it is on Thursday of.
But your wife wouldn't be happy, and ESPN is not happy,
and that's why I think maybe this bot. I just think they're a little more stable now than they were a year ago. But certainly, I think when we get to 2036, and maybe even before that, they're certainly in some trouble long term. Yep. The conference will be a shell of itself. I think it will probably still be better. Like the Syracuse's, Boston Colleges, and Wake Forest of the world are probably still better than what the Pac-12 has right now. Yep. But they will be a clear, like there's this argument of who's third and who's fourth, and the ACC is taking shots at the Big 12 and the Big taking shots here. There will be no argument past that. Like we will settle the debate. The ACC will be a clear fourth place.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe you're right. Maybe the lifespan is still there because they're able to backfill. We learned this with the college football playoff. We're so long-winded with this. I love it. Passion. We should disagree more often. The college football playoff committee looked at Oregon State, Washington State, and said, we're not giving you a full share of revenue. We know it's written in the contract, but we just can't. So I think ESPN, when you backfill, you replace Florida State with Memphis, ESPN says, we just can't. and that's where I think things will get hairy.
Yeah. That dichotomy is interesting, too, because ESPN's paying pennies on the dollars right now for what they're getting out of Florida State. Like they've been getting a good deal for a minute. Yeah. And when they're not getting such a good deal, I certainly am interested to see how that I'd love to be a fly on the wall, as the cliche goes.
Hey. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is exactly where I go during the MLB season because I don't really like the MLB that much. Why? Because my Texas Rangers aren't that good. With summer sports in full swing, whether it's the MLB or soccer or golf on the green, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling with FanDuel? I've been using the app to track the Texas Rangers, which is super sad, but also Shohei Ohtani. And I can put a couple hundred bucks, sometimes, maybe, if I'm feeling big spendery, on Shohei Ohtani to hit a home run. And when he does, I make even more than a couple $100. I make like $500 or $600 or $700. Easy to use, fast to pay out. Whether I'm placing a same game parlay or watching a bet right into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And $5 for $150 if your bet wins. FanDuel. Visit it today.
The SEC and Big Ten have been fighting this week, which is fun. And, before we even jump deep into this, the Big Ten's been taking shots at the SEC scheduling. Rhett Lashley of SMU took some shots. Signetti's talked about it. Washington's coaches, Fish has talked about it. What I'll say before we jump into this, I absolutely love this. I don't know about the effectiveness, like Lashley's comment. I understand what he was saying, but so Rhett Lashley specifically at SMU said, listen, the same 6 teams have won the SEC championship since 1964. Okay, well, it's not like any other conference has had like 9 teams. I understand what he's saying there, but what I like about it is no matter what you think of the effectiveness of Signetti saying, oh, well, we just canceled the Virginia series because we were going the SEC route, or Washington saying, the NFL doesn't play FCS teams in the middle of the season and things like that. What I love is for the last 8 months, we've had this narrative of SEC strength of schedule, SEC strength of schedule, SEC strength of schedule. And no matter what you think about how these coaches come off or sound, I'm glad that people are pushing back against that, right? Now, if you're an SEC fan, you absolutely love the strength of schedule argument. That benefits you. But I'm glad that there are some holes being poked in by some prominent voices in our sport, because we understand how the machine works. If we all chant SEC strength of schedule, SEC strength of schedule over and over and over again, the entire country believes it. And so it's great that there's been some pushback to that. It's great that there has been a lot of, hey, whoa, can we pump the brakes just a little bit and provide some context to how great this strength of schedule is? So again, I haven't even gotten to a question for you yet. I've just rambled about how much I like this, but I am clearly passionate and I love what these coaches are doing.
They're fighting. I love that they're fighting. The SEC and the Big Ten are not friends this week, which was not on my bingo card. The commissioner of the Big 12, Brett Yormark, sat every coach down in our conference and said, when I tell you 5+11, you will fight for 5+11. We are a team. There is cohesion. If I'm Greg Sankey, I sit with the SEC coaches. Tony Petitti, I say, don't say anything mean about the SEC or conversely, the Big Ten. And what did they do? They went guns a-blazing against each other. You can see that the SEC, and I know the focus is on the Big Ten and their comments here, but you can see the SEC is starting to kind of implode. 2 years without a team in the national championship game, and now they're talking like they're the underdog. Now they're speaking like the entire country hates them because they're the underdog. And that vernacular is just not going to work when you've told us how good you are year in and year out forever. That just means more. Then the Big Ten gets the podium this week, and even right lastly with the ACC, and they point at the SEC and they say, you're playing 8 conference games. In the Big Ten, we play 9. In the Big 12, we play 9. In the ACC, we play 9. That's part of college football. It's what we do. And Greg Sankey can't answer it. No one in the SEC can answer why they won't play 9. Oh, because our conference is tougher. That's not an excuse to not play 9 games in your conference. Texas high school football doesn't say, oh, that district looks really good. You can only play 3 district games instead of your usual 6 or 7. It doesn't work that way. It's part of being in a conference, and the SEC skirts around and they go, well, we're playing Power 4 games. You have 4 non-conference games. You have an extra non-conference game. And yeah, maybe you're using that against Wake Forest. Maybe you're using it against Oklahoma State. But you're also using it in November against Western Carolina. I thought it was a great comment. I wish I could remember the pundit who said it. The NFL doesn't stop in December and play a game against the CFL. It doesn't happen midseason. We don't do things like that. The SEC does that to further build up their win totals and their strength late in the year. And to Signetti's point, I think this is a big pushback on Kalani Sitake. Sitake stood up at Big 12 Media Days and said, we want to play 3 non-conference games against Power 4 opponents. Let's kill the mid-majors. He didn't say that. I don't think he wants to do that, but it would kill the mid-majors. They wouldn't get a check. And my problem is a Big 12 school, and this is a hard hypothetical, but just wrap your mind around it, like a BYU goes 9-0 in conference play, loses the Big 12 championship, and their 3 non-conference games were Western Carolina, Wofford, and Mercer. They're a 12-1 Big 12 team. They're going to the college football playoff. Wait a second. Their non-conference was Indiana, Ohio State, and LSU. They go 9-3, lose the Big 12 title. They're 9-4. They miss the college football playoff. We don't care about strength of schedule near as much as everyone says the committee does. The committee cares about wins. If you have 12 wins, there's no keeping you out. Hello, Boise State. Good to see you. If you have 12 wins, you're going to get in. I think what Kurt Signetti is saying is more of a pushback on that than it actually is the SEC. Let's just go win as many games as possible. And at the end of the year, our strength of schedule is 52nd, but we're not 9-3. We're 12-0. You can't argue against 12-0. That gets a whole lot tougher. You can't leave that out in a 12-team format. That's why the whole system's broken, and I think you should play as many easy games as possible.
What's interesting to me is it's a funny argument because what it is in fact arguing, right? When you really strip away the nuts and the bolts.
Okay.
What it is in fact arguing is which teams deserve to be 11-12 in our playoff. Mm-hmm. And if you or 10-11 if you're going to put the group of 5 team at 12, or when we upgrade the playoff, or not upgrade, certainly no, because adding teams does anything but that. But when we expand the playoff is the appropriate word. We're arguing about which teams are 13, 14, and 15, right? We're arguing about that, right? And really the debate is always between like the last two teams. It is who is 15 and 16 in this dance. And we are, man, both conferences and then your mark and I mean, the ACC doesn't know what the heck they're doing, on any given day. So they're not even really part of this conversation. But what we're arguing is so, I don't know, it's just mostly irrelevant, right? Like it is such a big argument of strength of schedule, this, that, and the other. Listen, if you go 10-2 in the Big Ten or the SEC, I don't care what, especially with bloated conferences and how big they are. If you go 10-2 in either of those conferences, you are in. There's no way for enough teams to go 10-2 to where there would ever be a problem with that, right? And so you kind of your pathway in. If you go 11-1 in the ACC, you are most likely in. There will not be many scenarios where that doesn't happen. And really the same is true for the Big 12. If you go 11-1, you're likely getting into this thing, right? Even if you lose the conference championship, I think you've got a really, really good chance to get in. And the problem is, just look back at the last 30 years of college football. There are never like 9-3 teams finish in the top 10. There are never situations where, oh man, what if 12 teams go 11-1? I don't know, man. What if hell freezes over? That's never happened in college football. Like there's never been 12 11-1 teams. And so this big debate is this big fight, strength of schedule. Who are you playing against? What's going on with the SEC's 8 games or our 9 games? It's hilarious to me because it almost always ends up working out. Now, Alabama fans have been salty for 8 months. Well, welcome to Florida State fans' life since you guys got in over us. But it's silly to me, and I do like the pushback from the Big Ten, I like the pushback from these other coaches because, yeah, chill out, guys. Chill out with your idea of what strength of schedule is, what your conference is at this point. You mentioned, the SEC freakout. We are at a point now, I don't know if you've noticed this, but we're at a point now where the SEC no longer claims to be the best conference. Have you seen this?
It's great, actually. It's really awesome.
They're deepest conference. Like
we're the underdog. Nobody believes in us.
That narrative. They no longer say we're the best. They say we're the deepest. And so that narrative is starting to change, and they're doing anything they can, obviously, to kind of reel things back in, and it's just marketing, right? Like they're trying to do their very best to market as they can, but it is funny to watch it all.
I think it's great that the SEC is having its greatest fit of the last 2 decades. It's awesome that the conference adds Texas and Oklahoma to become easily the strongest conference in college football history, and then says, we're so weak. We're only deep. We don't believe in ourselves, and neither do you. And we're going to prove you all wrong. Like, stop doing this. No singular dictator over the world was like, but I'm not even that good. Like, I'm just, that's like, it's not. You can't start playing the underdog card. It doesn't work that way.
It's like when remember, on a team-to-team basis, it does make more sense. Remember when Georgia won the national championship by like $1 billion against TCU, and those kids were like, "Yeah, man, like nobody believed this. Everybody doubted us. Kirby told us like go out and prove them wrong," and I'm like, you guys were overwhelming favorites to win this thing like every week of the season, like from game 1 to game 15. Yeah, like you. What do you mean nobody believed in you? Like you. So anyway, funny to see. Ryder Lyons, 5-star quarterback commit. Interesting news out of that. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so this was a very, the more you peel back about BYU and BYU's recruiting, I've never been someone who dissents the way that Kalani Sitake is handling that program right now, and I'm still not. I think what he's doing is right in NIL. But I'm reading this from On3. It says, despite being one of the top quarterbacks in 2026, BYU's Ryder Lyons, now BYU, will not be on campus until 2027 after he goes on his LDS mission. Throughout his recruitment, USC, Oregon were leaders. Sources told On3, Lyons was seeking a 3-year, multi-million-dollar deal wherever he landed. That included cash before his mission, and sources have said that could be up to the $1 million mark. Now, how accurate is that? I'm not sure, but On3 is usually fairly good in their reporting. They're fine, at least. And so From there, Utah fans and others in the college football world picked up on this and said, wait a second, we remember when Clark Gilbert, who's a prominent member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is a massive part of BYU, it's the flagship university of that faith, when he says the church wouldn't weigh in on dollar amounts or this isn't pay to play and will never be the highest bidder. BYU's kind of the highest bidder. And it's sparked controversy amongst BYU fans and Utah fans and Big 12 fans who are looking at BYU and saying, wait a second, I mean, which of these is true? And I think the big misconception here is that both can be true. You can be completely committed to a faith and completely committed to doing things the right way and within the legal bounds of college football. And you can also be stinking rich and pay the kids money because you have the money to pay the kids. And ultimately, when your athletic department wins, you're the front porch for an entire religion. And when your athletic department wins, that only brings more eyeballs to your higher cause. What is crazy about this, though, there are members, high-ranking members of the BYU, and I do want to push back a bit on pieces of this. There are high-ranking members of the church or at BYU, and which quick pause, no soapbox here. Quick pause. You're like, oh, what are you bringing up Berlin in sports for? It's not that. It's just that BYU is so innately tied. Every decision they make, since they are powered by the church, has the church in mind. So you have to consider that when considering BYU. It's the reason they don't play on Sundays. It's the reason they do things so differently in college athletics, but still way despite that. Unpause. Where I push back is if you're a leader at BYU, you kind of have to stop saying things like this. You can't say, oh, we won't be the highest bidder, or oh, we won't pay to play. We are in an era of pay to play for college athletes. We're in an era where the whole deal is be the highest bidder. And if you can not only be that, but also have good culture and good development, they can all go hand in hand. This isn't a knock on your program for being rich. We're not mad at BYU for being rich. The country's not looking at BYU saying, oh, those bigots over there, they have faith and they give kids money. No, they just have a commitment to a higher level of competition in athletics. But TJ, for both of us as outsiders of BYU, both of us as outsiders of their faith, and as but both of guys of faith, right? I don't mind that an institution based in religion is still playing IL game, because if you don't, you will lose every competition. If you say, you know what, because of God, we're not giving the kids a dime. That's not going to work. Yeah. That could never be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, is Kalani Sitake coaching for free?
Last I heard, no. Last I heard, he's
is there
the opposite.
Are there professors at college coaching teaching for free? Is there athletic director going for free? This is what you do to be competitive, right? Like, you hire good coaches, you bring in good people that fit your culture, that fit what you want to do from a culture perspective, but then you have to compensate them, right? If they were paying Kalani Sitake $50,000 a year, do you think he'd still be there no matter how strong the culture is? Like, let's be honest with ourselves. And so that's where I think that's the best parallel. And I know that's a departure from what we've known in college athletics for the last 100 plus years, right? Longer than either you or I have been along. Yeah. But that is what the game is today, right? And so, like, when we step back and we say, well, Kalani Sitake is not out there playing for free, I think that's where you look at and you say, okay, it's the same thing, right? You may not like it. You may not agree with NIL or rev sharing or any of this other stuff, but that's the line of the vein that we're in. They did not make Kalani Sitake a cheap offer to come to BYU, right? Like, they paid him fairly, and they pay everyone fairly. And so I do think you're right, though. The messaging has to be better, right? Yeah. There needs to be because faith is so tied in, right? The only faith the folks in Alabama have is in Nick Saban, right? As their Lord and Savior. I think that when you do have, and it is a sensitive subject, right? And you're not trying to I'm making jokes and stuff, but like, it is a sensitive subject, and there needs to be better communication and education around it as to exactly what I just said. Like, hey man, we want to compete at the best, and we want to use this as a tool to spread our faith and to spread our culture and to spread our values and to spread what we believe in. And we're proud of our guys going out and being the very best. And when I was at Liberty, they said that at a lot of our athletic events, like, hey man, we're doing this for something that's bigger than just our university, something that's bigger than just our football team. We're doing it for a higher calling, right. And we want to be the very best. in athletics. We want to be the very best in the classroom. We want to be the very best in our extracurriculars like fine arts and this and that and the other, because we're doing it for a higher calling. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to be the best in today's game, right? And really in anything, you spend money on fine arts, you spend money on your educational buildings, you spend money on your coaches, anything you're doing it and you're spending money on it, there just needs to be better messaging around it so that you don't get this conflicting kind of, well, you said this here and you said this here. If we tighten that up, if we're BYU, I think that's where everything gets, settled, right? Everybody gets kind of happy again. And if you just win games, people will ignore a lot of this too, which they have done well. Like, I'm not saying they've done a good job.
But do you want to be the vacation Bible school doormat of college athletics? Do you want to be the Baylor of the 90s? I mean, TJ, early 2000s, a joke of a college football program, a joke of a college basketball program. And their whole thing was, well, we don't care about athletics. We only care about God. And if you're an atheist, if you're whatever you subscribe to, this is sports, and we keep religion out of sports the best that we can. So I'm not trying to push anything on anybody or drive you towards something. I'm saying if you are a college athletics program, you have to win at athletics, no matter what your higher calling is. And then if you do win at athletics, your higher calling is going to be furthered by that. Your sure. reach is going to be furthered by that. So you say, like, okay, why does a brand like Oklahoma State want to win? Money? Not exactly. They want to win for furtherance of their program, to bring in more admissions, to bring in to keep the longevity of that program. I want to see my school succeed, not because it puts money in my pocket, but because it makes more people look at that and go, wow, I really like Baylor. Now I know what Baylor is. That's so damn cool to somebody who goes to a school like that. You love to see it. So that's where people get so misconstrued with, like, oh, wow, well, BYU must be evil now because they're paying players. Aren't we all? Everybody's paying players. It doesn't make you evil. And TJ, maybe a piece of this, because where this originated was Utah fans that are ragging on BYU. Maybe a big piece of this is just that rivalry being one of the most underrated rivalries in college sports.
We talked about this. We've said it several times. The Holy War is 365 days. So, I feel like we not crap on Utah a lot, but I think we give Utah a hard time for the way the last year has gone. Shout out to Utah for keeping the rivalry going just another day, right? Like, good work on the Utes. I need to see this year. I want to see a better year out of Utah, but hey, man, if you at least did this right and got some people riled up. So, hey,
Well, and the Athletic making this not even a top 25 rivalry in college football. They had like Kansas and somebody super random on there, and a few that made zero. Notre Dame USC being a better rivalry right now than BYU and Utah, which I think is as someone who went to the game last year, insane. This is another iteration. I was on a radio show out there with KSL this week where we talked about how this is like a verbally violent rivalry sometimes for two really sweet fan bases by and large. This is again just another blip in the chapter of the massive book.
Yeah, enjoy it. Drake, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work, bud?
Yeah, at Drake C. Toll on Twitter, or at Locked On Big 12, wherever you find your podcasts, and on YouTube, also on Twitter as well, at LO Big 12.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, no problem. Always good, TJ.